Hello again, guys. My name is Shantae Stevens. I am the president of an organization by the name of Urban League of Greater Richmond Young Professionals. So today we are here to do a live discussion about knowing your rights. This event is hosted by Patchwork RVA. And those of you who aren't familiar with Patchwork RVA, they are a community-driven nonprofit focused on promoting racial equity through education, voter justice, and community unifying initiatives and outreach to make Richmond a better place for all. So we're super excited for this super important conversation we're going to have today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our three panelists. We'll have another young lady joining us shortly, but I'm going to start off with introducing Ms. Cynthia Payne from the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office. So go ahead, Cynthia.
As you said, I was the Richmond Commonwealth Attorney's Office. I was a defense attorney for 15 years, and I've now been and I've now been a prosecutor for the last 17 years. And I'm here to try and help bridge the relationships that need to be bridged to get us all together.
Thank you for that, Cynthia. Thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Crystal Super from Patchwork RBA. So, Crystal, you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you, Shantae. Yes, my name is Crystal. I am the president at Patchwork RVA, and I also have my own business, Crystal Clear Financial Solutions. I am here to kind of offer a community perspective and share some of my personal experiences.
And our last young least is Ms. Carol Adams from the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I got that right.
It's okay. I'm Carol Adams, and here representing the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. I'm also a 32-year veteran in public safety. I worked 7 years in the Richmond Sheriff's Department, and I worked 24 years and 6 months in the African with the Richmond City Police Department. And I'm the CEO and founder of the Carol Adams Foundation.
Thank you. So we got a wealth of community work experience here on our panel. And like I said, we'll have Ms. Gwendolyn Smalls from Mothers Against Profiling joining us a little later. So I'm just going to jump right into the panel because we got a lot of questions, and this is a very important topic that a lot of people just want to just have these community conversations about. So the first thing that our questions are going to be around is traffic stops. The first question I have, and these questions are regarding number 3. These questions are open for anyone, but I'm gonna first give them to Carol and Cynthia to ask, and then we'll go with Crystal to give her experience when involving traffic stops. So the first question, if we have the right to remain silent, what's the best way for not responding to police officers without seeming difficult or making the situation worse?
Okay, communication has to occur. So remaining silent is not going to help the process. And the most important thing is that you cooperate, you answer all questions, and you follow all directions and instructions that's been given you. And if you feel that something's not quite right, there's a process. So you can take the officer's name, you can file a report with internal affairs, you can ask for a supervisor to respond on the scene. So that is the best advice for anyone. As a law enforcement officer, I've been stopped by the police and I follow their instructions. I don't tell them I'm the police either. I just follow what I've been asked to do and I provide them with whatever it is that they desire from me. And if I have questions or concerns, I'll wait until after the officer has finished his or her investigation and I'm free to go. And then at that point, then I might express some disagreement with what happened, but right there on the scene is not the police for it.
And I would agree with Carol that at the traffic stop is not the time nor the place because it's a tense situation anyway because nobody wants to be pulled over by the police for anything. And registration and insurance card. Those are required, you have to give them that. I know that some defense attorneys have cards they hand out to clients, well, I guess it wouldn't be clients yet, but saying, you know, I do not wish to speak with you, you can call my lawyer. It's a little bit longer than that. But you just, like Carol said, cooperate. There is not the time to get all upset and be questioning why you're stopping me, or you didn't have a right to do this, you didn't have a right to do that. You're going to have your opportunity, if it goes through to an arrest, to take that up with the judge who will ultimately decide it. So, and the judge is going to always ask the officer if the person was polite and cooperative, and that can go a long way with the judge. Guilt or innocence and sentencing.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate both of your answers and your expertise, because this is about knowing your rights, right? And I was in a situation I did not know my rights. For the most part, I'm always cooperative. So when I'm being pulled over, even if I don't know why, you know, as you mentioned, it's a tense situation. You're already kind of defensive. Like, okay, what's going on? You're a little fearful. It's the uniform, it's the badge, it's the gun, it's that whole, it's media. So, and so your best response really is to just listen and comply with whatever the officer is saying. If you feel as though you have not done anything wrong, then you may be a little more defensive and a little more testy, but that usually only escalates the situation and can make it worse. So that's why we're here today, to talk about what our rights are. So I love what you said as far as in that situation, either requesting to have a supervisor, another officer present there. I think that people should know that, because that's something that that would probably comfort me if I were in that situation. I'll never forget, I'm just gonna tell a couple of stories. So I was in a situation where I was pulled over in Virginia Beach. This was years ago. But I drove a really nice car. And, well, I hate to assume or to say that I was profiled, but I really thought I was profiled. And the officer was a little harsh with me, and I thought it was a little much. And I was defensive. And on that particular occasion, you know, I wish I'd have known what to say to him to let him know that, hey, you know, I'm trying to listen to you and I'm trying to be compliant, but I don't feel as though you're hearing me or respecting my rights, because I can't basically stand up for my own rights, and I have no idea what exactly they are. You know, of course, given my license and registration and things like that. So I appreciate that information, because I think that's going to be really helpful to a lot of people.
And I have to say, most people don't realize that a traffic stop is an arrest. It is a detention. So that you are to adhere to the instructions and directions you're given, even though you're not taken to jail, you're given a summons. And that summons means that you promise to appear. So at that particular time, you have done something that has drawn the police to you. And so you must follow the instructions and directions that's given to you. And now, not to say that some officers have a bad day, not to say that the community has no idea that a traffic stop and a domestic violence call are the most critical and dangerous calls that an officer can participate in. You're in your car, you don't know who's in the car, you don't know what you have in the car. We have no idea that you're there. So walking up to that car, and there's a lot of room there for a lot of things to take place, and we're on the outside. So it's edgy for everyone. And so it's really, really important that you take your time and you do. 6 and 12, what is it, 9 and 2, 12 and 2? 10 and 2. 10 and 2. should not be just reaching because you have no idea what's inside that car or what's going on in your mind.
I was gonna say one more thing, to dovetail off what you mentioned earlier as far as we are being summoned and we have to listen to the officer. I wanna, just mention something else that I learned, is that we have to consent to taking the breathalyzer test, if we're asked to, or you can be arrested. Can you clarify that or verify?
So you're saying consent to breathalyzer, but that means that some drinking or the suspicion of drinking or being under the influence of something. That's different than if you were in a red light, if you were in a stop sign or something like that. So then a series of tests will be done, physical tests will be done before you're asked to submit to the breathalyzer. So it's a process.
I would just say that basically when you get a driver's license, you're consenting to give breath or blood sample if you are arrested for DUI. However, it's not a situation where you can't refuse, because you can refuse. However, it's a whole other charge, and a charge actually that can hurt more for the individual than the DUI itself, because you lose your license for 12 months with no restricted license whatsoever. And a lot of times a breath test can also clear things up that you aren't as intoxicated as the officer thinks. Sometimes it's lower than what it is. So you can refuse, but you're going to get another charge.
And then there are also like medical reasons you could be. So if for an officer to stop you and to start to ask you to walk the straight line or to blow into the breathalyzer, some things have occurred for that person to think that possibly you're under the influence of something. But sometimes medical reason could cause you to swerve across the road because if your sugar is low or you might be having a seizure or medical emergency, so those things will happen as well. And so, like she said, taking the breathalyzer, if you're able to, will help clear up those things. But some things have to take place before it's not just straight to a breathalyzer, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you for that, lady. So we're gonna stay a little bit on this topic. As you all know, laws change all the time. The parameters involving why somebody should stop you, they've actually recently changed. So as of 2021, new laws in Virginia were introduced to address pretextual stops and enforcement of minor traffic violations. If the police search you after stopping you for one of the following, the evidence will be found inadmissible in court. And some of those reasons are defective equipment, like lights that are out, dangling objects, your dark window tints, expired registration or inspection, loud exhaust, jaywalking, or marijuana odor. So those things that we typically used to get pulled over for, new laws indicate that we shouldn't be getting pulled over for those reasons. So my question in regards to that is, when you are stopped by a police officer because of defective equipment on your vehicle or any one of the reasons that I just stated previously, and they suspect and do a search on your vehicle and find drugs, would that be something that is inadmissible? Because the premise of the stop was something that, new laws indicate that we shouldn't be stopped for in the first place.
There are actually two parts to that, because even if they stop you, even if it were admissible, as far as if they hadn't changed all the defective equipment laws, they would still have to establish some kind of probable cause to search your car. It's got to be more than just, I pulled you over for a defective tail light. Now that might, as suspected as a lot of times it is a pretextual thing. But if they did pull you over for one of those reasons, and through either something they saw in the car or whatever, it led to an arrest for drugs, weapons, stolen, you know, or anything like that, that wouldn't be admissible. But that's to be handled in court, that you're not out on the street.
So, from my understanding of the new law and it being inadmissible, okay, first of all, a lot of people aren't aware of that. Like, I can take that a little bit of knowledge, and without you expanding upon it and explaining it, I can think, oh, you have no right to want to search my car. And then I'm in that type of situation. And so how does a civilian being stopped handle that situation when you feel as though, hey, you know, I don't want you to search my car. You're saying you want to search my car. I'm not going to consent for you to search my car. And I feel as though your reasoning for wanting to search my car is bogus to begin with. So I'm already defensive. It's a testing situation. Help me. Help me.
But you said the key word consent, because if a search is conducted against your consent, your rights have been violated, period, okay? And so we just like with the drinking and the testing, a lot of things have to occur between that stop and that search. So some other things have to come into play just for even the officer. Now, I can stop you and say, may I search your car? And you can say yes, and you've given consent. But you have to think about it. It's like the officer is asking for your permission. But then if there's a crime that's been committed and you're being detained or arrested, and the search is being conducted along with the arrest, that's two different elements. Okay, so you have to understand that your body, your person, when you're arrested and you're going to jail, you're going to be searched as well. And you could be detained and patted down for weapons for the officer's safety. So that's a pat down is not a search. Some people think that it is a search. So the thing to do is to research the law and to read all of it. And I tell people it's like reading the Bible. You know, we take little snippets and we don't read the whole story. So it's important that you read all of the language so that you can understand and in what context that this is written, so that you clearly understand the rules of engagement and how they apply in certain situations. But consent is the key. If I ask you, you can tell me no. But if things have been done, I have to take you into custody, then some other things will happen. I have to search you prior to taking you to put you into the vehicle to transport you, and you going to the facility. Okay, and then your car, searching your car, it depends on if we tow it, we have to make sure that we do inventory as to what's in it, because a truck rental company is going to tow it away. And if something gets missing out of your car, you can blame the police because it went in our custody, even though we did not take it. So just for content, just research it and read all of it so that you can understand how things apply.
Okay. Very, very, very good information. So my question then too would be, often when you, well, from my personal experience, when you try to exert your right with an officer or question them, they get defensive as well. And already those situations kind of, you're being looked at as, you know, it's like this tango going back and forth between you and the officer. And you're just trying to stand up for your rights, but the officer is trying to exert his or her, right, authority, exert their authority, and that can be very intimidating. So,
Oh, I've been doing this for a long time. So there's different levels of authority. At home, it's the parents. When your parents tell you to do something, if you are courageous enough to go against your parents, if you were born in the 1960s,
right,
you know without having teeth, and it would be okay, right? So you got home, you got church, you got school, and then you have the streets. So the police are the authority over the street. And unfortunately, police officers see and witness the most horrific things. And even it's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the population is living a wonderful life and doing everything. But then we have 20% where things are just violent and crazy and just so many things. We have mental health, we have all of these things. And that's what we see every day. And that's what we have to interact with every day. everybody like my grandbabies or my babies, but everybody's not almost 60 years old on the police department. I've had different life experiences and stuff like that, so we all come from different backgrounds, different cultures. We wake up every morning, we have different things going on in our household. So the time to exert your right or to share your evidence is when you get to court. You cannot try a case on the side of the road. Like we started off, yes, sir, no, sir, thank you, sir, drive off, live happily ever after, prepare your evidence and your witnesses to go to court. And like you said, that's the first thing the judge asks, officer, how is that person out there on the side of the road? So knowledge is power. And so what you have to do is to absorb everything that's happening around you so you can be your best witness. But if you're arguing or going back and forth with me, then you're going to miss something. And you're going to change the way that the judge sees you because the officer is going to be the one to say who you were out there on the scene.
So I have another question to follow up on what you said. It gets testy, and we all are human, but we still have to recognize that we live under a system that can be oppressive, especially for Black people. So when we are in that interaction and we know that this police officer may have stopped us for something that's inadmissible, what type of evidence can we collect to show in court and prove our case?
So, I think that's it. So the police is not the trial, not the juror and the judge. The judge is going to weigh the evidence. So you don't have to prove to the police anything. The police has to prove his case. And if the judge does not see the evidence the way that the officer is presented, the officer he wastes the judge's time and his time, because when you get to court, the judge is going to throw it out. So that's the important thing, that if you don't hear anything else I say, the officer is not the judge and the jury, we are just the captains. When we see somebody there and we feel like they've broken the law, we are just supposed to act at that particular time and take them to the criminal justice system. That's why there are several different elements and components. First, he's got to take you before a magistrate, and that magistrate has to hear that evidence, and that's the first line, to make sure that the officer acted within reason as with the probable cause that he saw to detain you and to take you into custody. And then you're going to go to court, so the judge will hear the evidence as well. So the officer, we're just the catalyst, and your time spent with a police officer on the scene, on the street is 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes to the most, and then you're gone on your way. So it's important that you understand what we said in the beginning. Follow the instructions, take good notes. Every officer is wearing a name tag, and every vehicle has a number on it. And if you feel you was not treated right, once the interaction is complete, you can ask that officer, well, could you call your supervisor to come out here? I would like to speak with him. And then if he doesn't do that, then you can dial 911 and ask for the supervisor to respond out there. Because first of all, in the city of Richmond, the officer is supposed to tell you his name, supposed to call the supervisor to come. So he's broken a couple of rules if he or she doesn't follow that as well. And we do police the police. We need you to understand that. We do. And we don't want bad apples on our team. We really don't.
And as far as collecting evidence, we were talking about that, nowadays, the police all have body cam.
Yes.
So how you act on the body cam can be introduced in court, because your attorney is going to, if you get an attorney, is going to have access to that body cam. But on the flip side, it can also show if the officer wasn't polite, cooperative, respectful to you. So it works as a two-way street, but pretty much, I mean, you can also record yourself. There's nothing to keep you from doing a recording. I mean, I don't mean stick it in the officer's face or whatever, but, stick it somewhere where they can watch, where it can see what's going on.
And the other part as well is if you're driving and you see the light, you can, when you pull over, if, you're dialing home and say, listen, I'm getting stopped by the police, would you just listen in? And that way you will have to record it as well. But when you're being stopped, you can't be all over the place because you could be, we just don't know. And then if you have a passenger in the car with you, if they want to record, that's fine. But that in passengers must remember it's your traffic stop, because your passenger can make it horrible for you by just agitating and just, interfering. And that's important. You want your witness, your passenger to be your best witness as well, and to record, but not to, like you said, and if it's out on the street, you stand your distance and you record, your friends record, but don't, and because when you're reaching and pulling, you have no idea what you're looking for or what the intent is, because we're not algorithms just like, nobody can read a line. So it's always best to be safe when you're doing things, okay? And you don't have to announce it, you don't have to say, so many things that are said, you just stand back and you be the best witness that you possibly can for yourself or for someone else.
So I was just going to mention, as far as the recordings, we've seen so much of that. We've seen so much of that, and it does help us to bear witness of what's actually going on in those traffic stops. And then you mentioned the body cams, but there's been so many situations where that footage was not available, or the body cams were turned off, or it's a violation.
The body camera,
But where's the accountability of when those situations and stuff happen?
we have something called internal affairs. We have internal affairs divisions. And it was simply in the court is gonna want to see that evidence. And if that camera wasn't on, the officer doesn't have it. But every officer's camera is supposed to be on at all times. And that's a violation of policy if it is turned on. And you can ask to see that, or when it's time to go to court, because it's downloaded every day. And so that's a process, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It must. And what you all don't know about policing is when a police officer has done something, whether it's criminal, it goes to court, just like the regular trial. But then there's also an administrative investigation. Whereas the criminal court, they may not be found guilty, but that administrative investigation, they will lose their job because we have police policy in place that says what we shall and we should not do because we are held to a different standard than the community. So it's a double system for us, but that's not publicized. And so internal affairs and all divisions, if you call and you say you need to make a police complaint or report, and they will take your report, they can take it anonymously, you take it by email, you can file it in person in the city of Richmond. So there is a difference.
So I want to bring it up because this is also great information. But in that tense moment, you're on the side of the road, and your intentions is to comply, and you don't feel like you've done anything wrong, and for some reason, you can tell that stop and that experience is maybe going left. And at that moment, that's when you decide, oh boy, let me get my evidence, or let me start recording, or let me get this officer's name and badge number and everything. And so what's the best way to, I guess, transition, because you're already in that moment. What's the best way to kind of transition to being able to protect yourself and your own rights, and to do your due diligence as far as getting that badge number, that vehicle number, and documenting what happened during that traffic stop? What's the best way to go about that from our perspective, while still complying with the officer and them not being offended or escalating that situation?
So the officer has a responsibility that when they stop you, they have to prove their case in court. Okay? They have to show cause. First of all, why did they stop you? That's going to be number one, because you have certain rights in certain spaces. So, like we started off with, just maintain your composure. You follow the instructions that you've been provided. The name is easy, because if you get arrested or you get a piece of paper, it's going to have the name on it. But even if you miss all of that, when the officer's gone, you can dial back to 911 and say, listen, I was just stopped by a police officer at such and such, 1305 West Carey Street. The dispatcher will be able to tell you exactly who that was. Now, everywhere an officer goes, every encounter that the officer get out and stop someone, he's supposed to call into radio that so that we know where he is. All police vehicles have tracking systems, so that there's nowhere, we have the camera to show what it is that we're doing, how we're interacting, and we have tracking systems to show exactly where our cars are. Okay? So you don't have to feel like, if I don't get it, I missed it. Okay? Right. So don't get anxious. And it's a critical incident, yes, it's a crisis. It's almost traumatizing, but you have to maintain your composure, and you have to make it do that 15 or 20 minute count, and then you move on to the next steps. Okay? You breathe, you process, okay? And all of these officers are just like you. I don't see, we're human, we're just like you. We're human. We're just little old ladies and little old men with grandchildren and children that sometimes pluck out of the nerves. Or we're young people who are embarking upon our first career, right? So that's the way we need you all to see us. We're just like everybody else. But from our tour of duty, we have these clothes on, and we took an oath to protect and to serve. Okay? So that's how we want you to see us. All right?
I hope you guys are really enjoying this because I really wish I had that information about 15 years ago when I was on the side of the road feeling all intimidated and scared and overwhelmed, and because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong and I didn't know what to do, but I was emotional and I may have said some things I shouldn't have said also, but yeah, I made it to the stop.
And as Carol said, that it's tense, and sometimes the officer can also get a little rude. And some people, that's just the way they are. Some people, may have had a bad day. But you need to maintain your composure so it's not to escalate what, what it looks like he's trying, he or she might be trying to escalate. But, again, it'll be on camera, so when you go to court, the judge would see how the officer treated you just as much as how well you behaved.
So this is super interesting, especially when we're talking about our rights as far as, what they can and cannot pull us over for. I do have a question from one of the viewers. It's also about rights. What are civilian rights when it comes to stop and frisk here in Virginia?
They don't start.
So again, I will refer you to the law, so you can look it up, okay? Something called a Terry frisk and a Terry stop, right? So you look that up so that you can understand it yourself. So then if there's a crime that has been committed in the neighborhood and the description of the person fits you, I have to stop that person and I have to ask them some personal questions. I might have to detain them for a while because even we might want the victim back to look at you, right? So there are a lot of probable cause and reasonable suspicion. So when we talk about the facts of any case, we have to do our due diligence because you got to think about you may be the victim and you may be the caller on the other side. And if we don't do our due diligence to stop and to make sure that we're following up investigatively, then we have not done our job. Okay, so that's the thing that we need for everybody to understand. We have a lot to do, and just picking on people to stop them and to detain them, that's not a priority for us. And now some people work in certain communities, and there are things that are going on where they're actively out there walking and talking and stopping people. So I'm not going to say that does not happen, but read the law so that you can understand what it means and what's the difference between probable cause and reasonable suspicion. But if you fit the description of a suspect, or you drive a vehicle that fits the description, like, well, I don't know if something you just did about missing persons. So if there's a car or a description that fits something and we're investigating a crime, an offense, we have to stop. We have to do our due diligence, okay? So being detained for a reasonable amount of time, and I can't keep you on the side of the road for 3 hours standing there and trying to identify a suspect, because that's unreasonable, okay? But we have to do all the cursory checks and to make sure that you are not the person that we're looking for. Because if you're fitting that description, we let you go and don't do our due diligence, we fail with the victim or whatever it is that we're working on. And that's the thing that I need you all to know. I'm always talking to kids about creating their own style. If everybody's wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans, right? Then something happens to you and that's all you get in the description, that's all we have to go by. Okay? So create your own identity, your own style, so that, you know, that if everybody's wearing the same thing, that's like when we see movies when people blend in with clowns and they're trying to get away and it's a whole bunch of people dressed just alike, then we're running all over the place. So it is, you blend in, and when that description comes out, black men, white men, and baggy pants, blue jeans, a white t-shirt, such and such tennis shoes, that's basically what we're looking for. And when we do this, when we get important from her, we have to show her that this was the description, and this is what drew us to you. This is why we stopped you. So it's not like it's a free-for-all, but we have to articulate why we stopped and why we spent time with you. Okay?
And I think she was also asking about the frisking.
Okay, so the frisking means that we're looking for weapons, okay? So if I stop you and you fit in the description, and I'm gonna say, I'm gonna pat you to make sure that you don't have any weapons. And that's for my safety as well as yours, okay? So that's really, really critical, okay? Because we know that a gun, a knife, or reaching, and even if a phone, you have a bulge in your pocket, maybe just be a phone, but we really need to know that. Because see, I'm here with you, but then those are my two buddies, and they come up, and you and I are doing fine, but then they see you reach for something and it's in you, and they have no idea that it's just your phone. So then we have a problem going on. So communication is really, really key. So when you stop, say, well, okay, I got a phone in this pocket, I got such and such in this pocket, and but still the officers don't want it to be exposed, but it's just to make sure that everybody's safe at that particular time. Okay?
So I have a question. So as far as the stop and frisk, as long as they have, basically what you're saying, as long as they have probable cause, then they can stop you and they can frisk you. You can't refuse.
No, because we're spending time together, and we're gonna make sure that we're safe.
I don't want to spend time with you.
But, look, I have never met anybody that didn't want to spend time with me. I always treat you nice, and we're gonna know each other forever and ever, but because you're under sort of like, this officer goes with investigation, goes with detention and stuff like that.
So I have another question. Y'all tell me from that, and I may be taking this left field, but for females and male officers and situations getting out of control, we aren't comfortable with that whole stop and frisk thing. You want to speak to that?
Well, in our line of work, a female officer is called to come, but we talked about immediacy. So that has, be a witness, but that has to occur, because we can't let you stand here and not be safe with us while somebody comes from south side, right? Because that's a long way. But that's just a frisk, that's not a search. So when the search occurs, a female will be called to conduct the search, okay? So the frisk is for safety, okay? I'm right?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, making sure that.
And there's also a consent encounter. Officer can walk up to someone, just say, hey, how you doing, and all. That doesn't give them the right to frisk at that point, unless they say, can I check your records? But, if you have a reasonable suspicion that, or you have a reason for stopping, or you can't, but if you're just walking up to the street, community policing, then you can't just stop and frisk.
And that's an encounter that we just have, like there, we just have an encounter. And then if I say, can I frisk you, like, well, why? We just talk right now. Okay?
So I hear a lot of probable cause and reasonable suspicion. My question about that is kind of, what is the judgment on probable cause and reasonable suspicion? And I ask that because a lot of times in Black and brown communities, a lot of times that's thrown out. You know what I'm saying? I got probable cause and reasonable suspicion. But what does that actually mean? And what, you know, in police training, I mean, I'm sure you guys talk about probable cause and reasonable suspicion, but how do y'all define that? And what does that mean when we hear that from police officers?
So we don't define it, it's defined in writing by, it's the part of the law, okay? So reason suspicion is that I'm suspicious, like the drinking, like the weaving across the road, right? So you've been drawn to me, and then when you do something else, then I'm gonna pull you over for probable cause, because I feel as if that you might be under the influence of something, right? So some facts, when I talk about investigating, so it's multiple steps. It's not just boom, right into anything. You have to, and when you go to court, we have to share those things with the court. It's like, okay, if this happened, this happened, this happened, and this happened. Those are things that are not discussed. But again, go back to the reading, become knowledgeable with yourself, and read it all in good content so you can understand the difference between the other. And we're sitting here, we're having this conversation, but I want you all to know this is great information for you to know, but not for you to get on the side of the road and to have an argument with the police officer about reason suspicion and probable cause. So this is for you to be aware of what is actually happening and the difference between the two, okay?
We gotta get through the stop.
Yes.
And then present our case in court.
And the judge,
Yep.
the judge.
And call the dispatch, and that's when the officer's name can get all our stuff together.
And
I learned something today.
It's not an attorney, it's not a help.
So usually the reasonable suspicion is the reason to, you have to have that to stop the person, to even to effectuate any kind of stop traffic or otherwise. Probable cause, say it's DUI, you do the field sobriety test, everything, then you have to establish probable cause to place them under arrest for the DUI to get to the drug test. And if a traffic stop, you've had reasonable suspicion, but then during the course of the encounter, you establish probable cause that there's something more, guns, drugs,
So you got,
So give me an example of reasonable suspicion, like,
so the traffic stop. So if the car is weaving, swerving, okay, so then when I get up to the car, before the law changed, marijuana is exuding out of the car. Okay, all right? So that's totally different, another whole element.
right,
And then we see a gun over there, right? So, and not just that either, but if everybody in the car is reaching and all of that stuff. So all of these things, when you say the totality of the circumstances, so all of these things, that's the heightened awareness. So by the time the officer gets to your window, some things have occurred. So that's the key right there, okay? All right.
Yeah, it was over here. So I was just gonna comment because, a couple of things. So I'm gonna do the first comment first, because that may open up a can of worms, but, for parents, you know, when we talk about minors and children and their interactions, so we know that interacting with an officer, a law enforcement officer, can be traumatizing. We talk about the tense situation. But for a child, even more so. And I know a few situations where, you know, children, they don't know their rights. And parents, you know, you want to protect your young, you want to protect your young. What should a parent tell their child as far as interacting with the cops? And do any of those rules change as far as when the officers are interacting with a minor?
Well, first, we need parents to teach their kids that police officers are there to protect them. To protect them, okay? Too often, parents tell their kids, you better be good unless I'm gonna make them come take you away. So that's planting fear in them and telling them that I'm the bad guy. I'm the person who's gonna come to save them, to look for them. If the car is on fire, the house is on fire, if the fire department's not there, I've gotta come in and I've gotta save them. I took an oath to give my life trying to save them. All right, so we need for children to understand and to be around police officers in positive situations. Because sometimes we have stories that parents have had not so good experiences, and they share that with their children, and then the children are not allowed to have a true experience because in the back of their mind, they're still thinking about the horror that their parents experienced. Okay, so with kids, we're not here to arrest kids. We're not here to scare them to death. We're here to protect and serve, just like we all do. And so that there are processes in place for you when officers are talking to them, but talking with the parents and take your child to the police station so that you can see that it's not like what you see on TV. All right, and any time, any opportunity you get to be around the police. And Gilman, I drive my kids around the block and police car, I love to stay home for the silence, you might just stay home too. Drive to old people crazy, but that's my relationship with those babies. Because I need them to know that I'm there to protect them. I'm there to be there for them. And I know in Black and brown communities, there's been some horrific incidents, but I'm there to create that change and to show them something different than what they've experienced before. So that would be the key. And my organization, we do something called the law in your community, and we haven't done it in a while because of COVID. But we come out to different groups, and it's about 20 of us from different organizations, and we talk to you specifically. We talk to them with their parents, so that they get to see us for who we are, and not see just what they see on TV. Because if you haven't had an in-person experience, you only go with what you've seen and heard, and that's not a true experience. If that wasn't your experience, that was somebody else's.
Great, thank you. I was just gonna mention also that, as far as with the minors, I mean, some of these kids are just, it's different generation now, and they're just, a little disrespectful. They don't respect their parents, and they're fearless. But it's a difference between, you know, being a criminal and just being a little rude.
But that's why I asked the question the way that I did.
Yeah.
So of course we have kids out there that are doing different things, and that, you know, they're just in a different trajectory, but still those children need love, they need nurturing, they need affection, and whoever it is that can get across to them, regardless of how they act or interact with you. I don't give up on anybody, and there's not one person out there that I can't have a positive effect on, and that I know. So that's the thing, and so our babies are missing a lot of things, you know, a lot of things, and so we don't have to stand in the gap. No uniform, no or uniform, it doesn't matter. I have to be a human being to that child. Policing is my profession, and I'm inherently a nurturer, and that's all that I can be in or out of it. Yes.
Wait, introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Gwendolyn Smalls. I'm so sorry that I was late, but I had some things I had to do, and it just got some backed up. But I'm here. I'm glad to be here. Yes, how you doing? Good. So I'm going to add to what Carol said. I think the difference of our kids in our community, Black and brown, is that we have to take down the empire of police, right? We have to see people like us that gets off the couch, that needs a job, applies for it, for the benefits, for the pension, and that's it. And then, you know, some of us get on the job because they want to be on the job. Their life, people who grew up as kids want to be a police officer, and that's what they do. There's some people who get it for a job. So I think what we have to do is see through the uniform and see through the policies and procedures and the laws and see that individual as that individual. Where we came from, what community he was brought up in, and also home. What was he taught at home about most of the communities that he has to serve? Because some of them come from far out and they come into inner cities with their perceptions on how they were taught, what they believed, and how they basically use all of that to try to enforce the law. Because police officers, as we know, are not the law. They are enforcers of the law. So if the Los McQueen doesn't make the law, then, you know, no one can enforce it, right? So if the law's on the books, that is their job, but some of them take it beyond. And they build up that empire, which is, since slavery, when it first began, they're built up for the reason that it was, but when you're taught that policing was for the history that it was, for those who were not allowed to be police officers for a while, when I came on as a civilian, there were stories from the older Black people who was like, you know, when we weren't out on the job, and last time out on the job, so it was Italian and Irish, it's the old boy network. So with that being said, policing has a lot of history, but people make the badge. The badge don't make the people. I've seen it all, I've heard it all, I've experienced it through my brother's death as well in police custody. So I I don't see, but it's hard for our kids though, because they're boogeyman by the police, and they're older people too. You know, older women in our community gets anxiety when they see the sirens, because they don't know how that person, 20, 30 years younger than them, would react or feel that they want to be brassy to someone. You don't know what they, like to say, you don't know how they are when they go out of bed, what the day is like and how they're gonna be, but we've had some racial incidences in our precinct, and we were in Harlem, so just imagine, you coming from Long Island or Brooklyn with your, but see, there's a history with the Renaissance and, you know, the people like that, so I just wanted to add, it's just the empire of police that we have to minimize and bring down.
I agree wholeheartedly with that, Gwen. It is about the person. And unfortunately, in all career fields, we have some people who, you know, probably shouldn't be in the career that they're in. But I think, you know, we start breaking down those barriers by having conversations, police having conversations with the individuals that they're, you know, protecting in those neighborhoods, like really having conversations to get into that human element. I know for me, I have children. We have police officers in our neighborhood who, you know, they don't police our neighborhood, but they work. They live where we live, and my son loves the police because he sees Kara, you know, who is a police officer. He sees her police car. He sees Barry down the street. Like he sees them in their uniform, but he also sees them as, you know, his friend's dad. So having those conversations, those interactions with police, we need more of that to kind of break up the stigma of how they, you know, police us. But I want to get back to some questions, some audience questions. We got a lot of viewer questions coming in. So one of the questions I like to ask, just get some good ones. How do we address corruption? How do we address those bad apples in the police force? Too many times cops fear speaking out against their peers because of retaliation. So how do you change that culture? And, you know, what are you guys doing to kind of make it so that it's, you know, those officers who are speaking up will do so, and that, you know, you get rid of those bad apples?
So we actually have policy and procedure in place, is that if we're together and you do something bad, and I'm gonna get in trouble, if I try to come up for you, you might keep your job, but I'll lose my job if I lie, you know, being truthful, being honest is a priority. And then, so there's a lot of police policy around that, you know, about encouraging officers that when they see another officer, you know, that you're violating policy if you don't intervene. If you were mistreating Michelle over there, I would have to intervene and say, no, that's just not the way. And that's the key, you know, as for us. And when you say corruption, corruption was the old days when they were stealing money and doing things and, you know, and just cracking down on neighborhoods and communities, and we don't have those kinds of things going on anymore. It's all about, you know, because it's too much technology to, you know, we've grown past that. But as far as being my brothers and my sisters' keeper, that's the goal. Because when I witness something and it's not right, then it's my priority to put you in check and to notify my supervisor and to let them know what I saw. If you continue that behavior, you say, oh, my bad, I didn't realize that's where I was. Because sometimes we can have interactions and we don't see ourselves, right? We don't see how we're engaging. And so it's incumbent on me as your partner, as your friend, to say, you know, you look at that right there. You know, it didn't have to go that way. And when we see the incidents that occurred on TV, we saw all the officers being stand by witnesses, right? They didn't go in to interject. And that's what that comes from. When you see something that's not right, the same thing we ask the community, when you see something, say something, that's our responsibility as well. It's not to stand by to witness something wrong or something horrifying happen and not to intervene. Okay? And so that, and because of the George Floyd incident, a lot more agencies have had to put in and create policies like that. It's like, this is your responsibility because the managers and supervisors can't be everywhere all the time. So as individual officer, you took an oath to serve and to protect, and that is your responsibility.
And also add just a little bit to that.
Although that there are policies in place, there are ways going to be some bad apples that somehow fall through the cracks. and they do manage to be a part of the corruption because they learn the system so well, they never think they're gonna get tripped up. But they do, so there's a thing called, I believe it's accreditation that some departments have to have, so they have to have some type of accountability for monies and evidence that are in their precinct to be able to have that. So if they don't come to that, then maybe there's some corruption going on, and they could do have some accountability for it. But sometimes when you follow the money, someone took it, so it's very rare, but it still happens even in 2021.
And so for us, if I collect money, then you have to come and you have to count it as well and sign off on it, and we take it to our property section. So all of our evidence is collected, and you must do it before you go on your next call. And everything that you collect must be listed, itemized, and then it's checked into like a banking system, right? That says it's a warehouse we have, and whatever money you say you have, you count it, and then I have to count it, and I have to sign off on it, and it is turned into, just like a banking system, okay? And then, as she talked about the tracking things, yes, bad apples, yes, but we still all have to work hard to make sure that those things aren't happening, and that's why internal affairs and in groups, but in, units, like we have an office of professional accountability, these are things that we can put in place so that we can make sure that things that used to happen are not happening as frequently anymore. And then also there's something called, the early warning system, sort of like with your driving record, when you get points taken away from your ticket. Same thing with officers, if you keep getting them, let's say if everybody in this room called to complain on you, but we never really found you guilty of anything, that's an indicator right there, that you're not doing something quite right out there. So we need to bring you back in and to give you some training and to see what's going on with you and with your life, because you wasn't nasty or unprofessional, but you were kind of rude, and and the people didn't pick up the phone and call. So that's why it's important for you as a community to call when you have an incident with an officer. So because you're the principal, we don't know, we're not having the encounter. And please, please, please pick up the phone and call when you have an encounter and you feel like something wasn't quite right, because that gives us the opportunity to go in and to check on that officer to see what's happening with him or her, and make sure that the next encounter is a different experience.
We're all family.
Yeah.
So that's what it is.
So I was just gonna say a couple of things. So the police obviously have their policies and their procedures, but it doesn't stop there. I think that part of the answer to that question too is on citizens as well. I know there's a lot of agencies that have come together to try to impact change in the community through legislation, and so as citizens, one of our strongest tools really is the ballot box and being able to vote our representatives, and things like this, knowing your rights. And then we talked about, the stigma with Black and brown people and our experiences with the police and the history there. So changing that narrative, the programs that you guys have with the community to try to change that perception of it, and so that young people, aspire to be officers, and they don't feel intimidated, and they want to be part of the solution and not, part of the problem. I think, that's the old adage, if you're not part of the problem, exactly, one or the other. So, having more people in law enforcement and, choosing that as a career and being a part of that solution, being an engaged, knowledgeable voter and citizen, and encouraging your brother, your sister, your neighbor, to do the same. That's how we kind of hold each other accountable as well, and we can help some of our officers out.
And not just through legislature, but police departments are always looking for volunteers in policing. There is no agency that's operating that is not really have their doors open. And there are citizens academies where you can go and you can learn the police operations. Then there's opportunities to volunteer. There's advisory committees, so many different opportunities for you all as young people in the community to participate. Neighborhood watch, all of these things that happen. We have with our police commissioners, lots of community programs where we partner with the community. So that way we're working side by side with these so it's not just you see me once every year or so, but we actually get to spend time together once or twice a month, so you really get to know me as a human being, but then you also get to have an impact on what we're doing, because I get to hear from your perspective, up and personal, close and personal. So there are a lot of opportunities, not just through legislation, but go to your police department. And before I said, go visit the station, because it's not like what you see on TV. And that's what we want you all to understand. Don't let TV create your reality. It's not. TV is a business. That is a form of entertainment. You find a police station in your neighborhood, you go there and you get to meet those people that are policing your neighborhood, because they're in your neighborhood more than you are. And they're protecting your home while you're away. And they want to know you, because when you have a crisis, you're not going to be like you are sitting right here to me. You're going to be way over here. And so you met me today, and the next time I meet you and it's a crisis, I already know you. We already have a level of relationship. And so, and I'm just going to say, you know, once you get, you take your time, calm down, and then we can talk. I might be just there to hold your hand, because we've already established a relationship. So please do that and take your kids out, but you go on and meet the officers who are policing them.
Can I say one quick thing?
And I want to say that about the community, when she said community policing, because that was one of the biggest things we had to have because of the teenagers. We even had one of our officers get attacked on a scooter, you know, so by the kids, just for fun or just for their pleasure. So like I said, I think when they organized National Night Out was to bond the community with the police officers in their precinct, jurisdiction or area. So, yes, that helps out a lot. That helps out a whole lot, because even in our precinct, we had some, I forgot the name of it, but the kids used to come in with their uniforms on and just hang out with the community affairs officer or juvenile domestic officer, and they just sit around and they go do programs, they do ride-alongs, so they make them feel included. But those are some kids. So you're not talking about all the kids. So it's almost like you have to find your kid's niche. So then you have to find the niche, I believe, in that individual child to calm their nerves or to make them excited that maybe they want to grow up instead of in a hot water, they want to leave it out. Yeah.
And I'm just gonna go back to, I guess, the original question about, making private clinic corruption or whatever. Anybody can call IB or internal affairs. It doesn't have to be the accountant. You can have the encounter with the person, but if you observe something where someone wasn't being treated fairly, then you can call as well and report it.
Can I just answer? I'm sorry, I'm just so I just want to say, and that's true. It's almost like voting. Sometimes when you don't get results, people don't call. And then snitches don't get stitches, or whatever that saying is. So I agree with you, because sometimes it is family, so not everyone gets to get disciplined for their actions. And I think that's why when we see a lot of police shootings and a lot of police killings, people lose faith, because number one, the laws are not there. And number two is you can yell all you want to, no one comes to your rescue, and then regards to that cop is still out there. So if he's not in your community, he's in another community. So the Justice Department doesn't come and dismantle that or debunk the police department, then you have an issue with black and brown always getting pulled over, always getting tickets. So yes, I agree. That IAB, no, but make sure that IAB is not a part of the system so much that they basically want to look out for their brother because of the outsiderness. Yes, that is an issue too, being the outsider. So, I mean, that's why I say the Empire Police just have to be different. It doesn't have to be debunked unless it needs to be. It doesn't have to be all this other stuff that people are asking for to be dismantled. I just think that psychological testing should be just like drug testing. They should regularly do that to make sure you are up on your job, you are alert, there's nothing going on, you're not even taking drugs or got to be sent out to the farm because of an alcohol problem. I just think that we have to realize people are people. We get dressed up every day. They get dressed up every day. The only difference that they have is that they have laws to protect them from lawsuits and things that they are legally wouldn't have if they was just regular citizens.
So My next question is kind of along the lines of, how police deal with our communities. It is the public's sentiment that the police don't necessarily have the training to deal with Black and brown communities. And also the training to handle, people who experience a mental health episode. So what's being done internally within the police department to address that? Because that's something, the narrative of police not, treating Black and brown communities different and how they police other communities, as well as those individuals who, have those mental health issues. So what are the police departments doing and what is the state doing to combat that?
Well, first of all, the state of Virginia has required that mandated several years ago was crisis intervention training for all officers to be able to have some training. And it's a 5-day training course where you have to go and visit Central State and sit and talk and deal with individuals who have been deemed mentally unstable to some degree. So that, and then you have to go back to work in service. So that's something that the Department of Criminal Justice Services has created. But what I guess what you all need to know is that police departments don't operate on their own when it comes down to training and mandates. We are ruled and governed by the Department of Criminal Justice Services Board. So they're the ones who dictate what the training curriculum is and what should be in that curriculum. And they're the ones who keep the scorecard actually for all officers as well. And so as for certification, officers have to be certified. And if you lose your certification, you cannot work in a work as a law enforcement officer. So those are some things that you all don't know. So we don't just make the rules ourselves, just like we don't make the laws. We are governed by different entities when it comes down to the laws, the court system, the outcomes of trials. We're just the mediator, but then as well as our training. So we've all had to go through a lot of bias training, cultural diversity. But what would actually make the difference is if we had more Black and brown people to apply for these jobs so that they can show up in their communities and they can get the experience that they desire for the people that look like them. And so when we look at these dynamics, things we talked about before, I'm 5'4". I like to say 5 because I put my heels on and I weigh 99 pounds. But it was at one time that there was no way that I would have been deemed to be able to be a police officer. First of all, because I'm an African American woman, I'm an African American and I'm a woman, and I don't fit the criteria, which was 6'1" at one time. So that eliminated a lot of people from this position. But at this particular time, anyone and everyone desiring to do this job and step up to the plate and to be a part of this process. And I didn't share before, but I came kicking and screaming to be a police officer. My father murdered my mother when I was 17 years old. Pow, 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 and I was in the next room. 12 years of escalating violence where I called the police to come. And they came, but there was nothing that they were doing about domestic violence in the late 70s and early 80s. And being a police officer was not on my radar. And I say, good Lord sent me here. Because to make a difference, you got to be a part of the change to get some different results. And so you have to step up to the plate and to become a part of the profession so that whatever experience you had, that you can give something totally different. That's it. We need Black and brown people to join the profession, to change what it looks like, and to change the results that are shared, that are given in the community.
I totally agree. But I do have a retort to that. Often, Black and brown people are policed different, as we've kind of already spoken to. And it's too often, before we even get to the point where we want to go out and, the person that we are at 14 and 15 isn't the person that we are at 24 and 25. We mature as we age. And sometimes we may have just been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And oftentimes we have things on our records and stuff, or even the medical, a lot of these,
parents, their kids are being, on all these medications and have all these diagnoses and things like that, which don't even give them a shot. So they are already blackballed, or, they don't qualify. They don't qualify.
The 80-20 rule. 20% and 80%. There's a huge pool of individuals, such as yourself, that qualify to be law enforcement. We have a lot of good students at most of our universities that will qualify to take these positions and to do well in these positions. And it's unfortunate that the profession has been made not to be attractive to black and brown people because of the experience. But in order to change the process, you have to become part of the process. So you have to be, most of us, to grow, you have to be uncomfortable. You have to get out of that space. So we can't be fearful of that because, and like I said, I came kicking and screaming, but once I got here, I knew this, and I can tell you in the whole world, I have the best job in the whole wide world, and there's nothing no other officer can do out there to make me regret what I do in my profession and how I interact with individuals, because that's that person's interaction, not mine. And I'm not gonna walk away from all of the good that I do because of the bad that somebody else has done.
But also say this too, is that that's why I was kicking too, when they was like, well, you're going to Harlem, and I'm like, no, I'm not. Because I lived in the Bronx, and here I am, they were sending me to Harlem. So, yes, and I asked them, even at the academy, well, why you sent me there? Because that was during the crack era, and I heard bad stories about Harlem. And they was like, because they want you to be in the communities closest to your home. And I think that was part of their strategy to help with community relations, is that, hey, Johnny was 5, 14, 24, and now he's on the job. So he knows the old lady upstairs, and he knows the guy at the convenience store because he went to school. I've heard those stories before. Yeah, well, we've known him since he was a kid, and he's doing good. So yes, those things are important to have people in your community, within your community of policing.
So I want to add to that, what is the police department doing to recruit black and brown individuals? Like, are they making, this profession, appealing to them? Are there any like mentorship programs that maybe come out from graduating from your criminal justice degree that they can be a part of? And what are you guys, and who are y'all getting in front of to recruit black and brown individuals?
Every department has a recruiting unit. They go to all the universities, they all travel together and go through this pipeline where all students are, okay? And we have internships, we have volunteer opportunities. I have in programs like this, we're all speaking. The last program that me and my chief sat on, there were like 3 kids in the audience, and they were asking these questions, but by the end of the day, they would say, where do I apply, Ms. Carol? I'm like, it's right here, and put my name down as a reference, right? So the job is there and waiting to be occupied for good. And so the key is because it's just like driving a car. When you have an accident and you get a little bit shaky, you don't stop driving. You get back in that car and you drive some more. You might not like driving on the highway, but if something in New York City you want, you're gonna get on that car and you're gonna go to New York City. So that is the same thing. So we have to stop sitting on the sideline. Because unless you're in this basketball, football, unless you're on that field at the Super Bowl, you can't complain about what those guys did in. Because you haven't taken a lick at all. You've just been sitting in the stands. So you have to become part of the process in order to implement the change that you desire or you want.
So,
It's not realistic.
my next question, we kind of talked about the experiences that black and brown people have with actual policing, but there are also bad experiences when it comes to being in courts and getting charged with things that our black counterparts that kind of don't get the same type of sentencing or the same type of punishment that we get. So what are the officials, like I know we have DA, district attorneys, and Commonwealth attorneys, how can you individuals in the community, press upon, those individuals to really, be fair when they are handing out sentences to Black and brown communities.
Okay, well, we have sentencing guidelines that are done by the state that, take into consideration, regardless of whether you're black, brown, white, your background and everything else, and that comes up with a recommendation. And so you should be sentenced within those guidelines, regardless of your race. To be perfectly honest, I half the time do not even look over to my right and my left, depending on which courtroom we're in, and see who I'm prosecuting. I'm prosecuting the facts that I have in front of me, not who's understanding over there. They could walk out of the courtroom, see me, and I probably wouldn't know who they were. I try to be fair across the board, and raise very, very, I don't think it ever enters my consideration in sentencing or trying someone.
Can I just ask, I have to say something?
So, I mentioned that before I answered that now, right? So my approach to this question is a little different. I think that a big part of the problem isn't simply race. I do recognize race has something to do with it, but economics too, and economics, because when folks go in front of these judges with a public defender, it's different when you have your own representation. You can properly represent yourself, and you'll get a much different outcome, and that's what I see as probably the greater problem.
Now, and that's true to some degree. However, there's some public defenders who have devoted their lives to defending indigent defendants. And they are very vocal, and they have been vocal, I know, in the last year or so, as far as with some of the new legislation and everything. But on the flip side of that, somebody a lot of times will go out and just hire a lawyer because that way they get a paid lawyer, but that lawyer might not have any background in criminals, so it doesn't. So, yeah, I mean, so it doesn't, I don't think it's necessarily just because you have a paid lawyer, you're going to get a better outcome.
Can I just say something? Thank you, and yes, I do agree.
Exactly, because if your paid lawyer can just be as legal legal as a super lawyer. It's all about doing your homework and defending your client. So if you are assistant district attorney, you're just gonna come in there and just do your job, which is basically whatever the judge said, the law says, and the next. You have some ADAs that are like that, but then you have some who are, I guess, are really, really good. I don't know. But I also believe that, yes, money sometimes can make a difference, but I really think it is the education that you do for yourself. Because your ADA or your attorney might not know that. And from my experience, there was a new law that had to deal with full qualified immunity that I happened upon, that my lawyers happened upon as well, but the judge happened upon too. But there were some people didn't know about that new law. I think it was after 2015 when that new qualified immunity law came out. So yes, you have to be your own attorney, regardless.
Can you guys, speak a little bit to the importance of voting when it comes to dealing with, the DA and also your police departments? How do people affect you through voting? Can you guys speak to that?
I think it's very important to get out and vote. If you happen to see a candidate, or there's a candidate that really echoes your beliefs and your feelings, not only get out and vote, but perhaps help that candidate as well. Volunteer with them, put up signs in people's yards or in your yard. But it's very important that if you want a certain type of person as the Commonwealth attorney or as the mayor or whatever, you've got to get out and vote. You can't count on someone else to do it.
We've seen, um, many times the impact of us going to the ballot box and voting, our rights. And we have to continue to do that because that's truly where, the change, begins. So I firmly believe in that.
And it's important to vote, but it's important to get to know who you're voting for and what they stand for. And you have to spend time with individuals, and like we have said about everything, the law, you know, you need to know what you're charged with, but you need to know what that person believes, because a lot of the times we meet candidates, they show up at election time, especially the church, and that just, you know, they come and they go, but you need to know what they stand for, who they stand for, and what they've done, not just what they're promising to do. You need to know what their track record is before you check that box, and to make sure that you believe in what that person believes in and enough to give them your vote.
And I'm not even gonna add to what they're gonna say as far as on the same thing that they're saying, but I will say this now. I was told to go down to the General Assembly and help your local officials pass the laws that you want. So just don't vote them in. Go down to wherever you vote for, you support your candidate, and make sure that you continue until that law is passed. And some of the guys and whoever's there to make that decision don't always vote for what you want the first year or the second year, but you just keep going because you never know. Once that law is on the books, it's on the books. That's it.
And the General Assembly is the place, not just the ballot box. You need to go down to the General Assembly for it to impact change, and especially the laws where we're talking about police reform and stuff like that in the criminal justice system. So just want to make sure you go to the right place.
And your elected officials, they want to hear from you. Those that I, speak with, they want to hear from you, the voters, the people that voted them in. We have to hold them accountable as well.
All right, so we talked about a couple of the laws, and I'm just adding on to what you guys have said when it comes to voting. A lot of the laws that have recently changed in Virginia came by way of people going to the ballot box and voting, especially when it comes to local. And when we go to laws that are, a little bit higher, like at the Congress and federal level, we do have the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that is currently with the Senate. It hasn't been passed yet. This law it addresses all the issues that people have been talking about when it comes to policing. There's a stipulation in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that will put it in law for officers to have the duty to intervene. So it won't just be, something that they put in policy, but it will be actual law for officers to intervene when they see something, when they see another officer doing something illegally. So what you guys can do to get that passed through your Senate is contact our state senators. And for those of you who do not know, our state senators are Tim Kaine and Mr. Mark Warner. So you guys can call their offices at any time and let them know that you guys want that George Floyd Justice and Policing Act passed, because we want to see more accountability for officers, and not only does it protect us, but it's going to protect them. So that's just my caveat when it comes to voting. I do have one more question. One more question, because we getting short on time, and I won't be able to ask everyone's question, but I'm gonna go with this one. Why should the public trust Richmond Police Department, or all the police departments? I want you guys to kind of speak to the importance of police officers, what they do for our community, and why it's important that not only we trust them, but also they trust us.
I think it goes back to what Carol said, it's 20/80. 80% are very, very good, should be doing it. 20% probably picked the wrong profession, might not have, should have been a police officer. But you've got to, can't just assume because they're in uniform, because they're a police officer, that they are going to mistreat you or disrespect you in any way?
I would say, to that point that, you know, just as a citizen, if I am being wronged or being victimized in some sort of way, I want to be able to call the police and they come to my rescue or be there for me, prosecute the perpetrator or take, you know, to make my streets safer, you know, for myself, for my family, for my business, for my health, wealth, or well-being, my property, whatever the case. So, you know, we want the law to work for us as well, you know, individually. And so there's two sides to that coin. You know, we hate it when we see, and I think many of us, especially in Black and brown communities, we have, you know, family members, people that we love, and they're incarcerated. And I think that's part of the stigma too. And you know, our negative feelings towards law enforcement and things. But there's two sides to everything. Like you said, it just boils down to kind of getting to know them, seeing beyond the shield, the uniform, and seeing them as individuals and as people.
And you said it, when something happens, you get a down, and we have to come. Whether you cuss at us, no matter what you say, we have to come. And we're gonna come, and we're not gonna hesitate. But I want you to think about this. Look up and see how many police officers are in our nation, 200, 300,000 police officers. And we see incidents where police officers don't act professional. That goes back to that 80-20 rule. 80% of those individuals, like myself, are coming to work to do everything that they're supposed to do, and best way that they can. But when we turn the tables as well, 80% of the community is doing the same thing, they're doing everything that they're supposed to do. And there's 20% of the community that when we see on the news that, you know, somebody has done something, and it's either a female or a male, or a young person or old person, they say, and we get grouped with that bunch of people. And that's just not fair. So it's important that you understand that no matter how you feel about us in policing, we're still coming. We're gonna come to your rescue, and we took a oath to sacrifice our life for you, and we're not gonna turn our backs on
And I'm gonna say this, honestly, it's hard. It's very hard. And I don't wanna sugarcoat it whatsoever, because 90% of the people are comfortable with people that look like them. They feel like they can understand them when they have an issue. When they're talking about more sympathetic or empathize with their situation. So, but like Carol said, you come into your precinct, you get to know who's in your community, the new ones, the newbies, or the old ones, and you get to know your chief, your captain, your deputy inspector, you get to know all those guys. And then you also get to know who is your community police officer. So if you got to relate to someone, you can maybe contact their community relation officer. Then there's numbers and information on the door, on maybe the walls, so that when you come to the precinct, you can do that too. So if you do feel offended, sure, you can call INV, but if you build a relationship, even with the civilians in your community, we can help you out. That's part of our job too. At least that's how I felt.
All right, guys, we are at the 8 o'clock mark. We have a couple of statements that I'm just going to share. Actually, we'll keep going. So I just want to, the takeaway that we have from this panel was when you are interacting with the police, your initial interaction, please make sure you guys stay calm. Arguing or trying to, state your case, it's not the time to do that when you're actually being stopped or having that initial interaction with the police officer. You will have the opportunity to state your case in court. Also, do your research. Be your best advocate when it comes to understanding what your laws are, and what you can or cannot do when it comes to interacting with the police. And last but not least, vote. Get involved in your civic process. We're in the state of Virginia, and right now, this year, we're going to be voting in a new governor. If you guys are not aware, you can go in and start with early voting. Early voting will go all the way through October 30th. So go out there, find out where your closest precinct, your polling place is to vote. If you are not registered to vote, please do that. The last day for voter registration is October 12th. So, stay involved, vote, stay calm, get to know your police officers, and, know your rights, you guys. Patrick is gonna provide more information, after this live. And thank you to everybody who tuned in. And if you have any more questions, we'll try to get those answered as we, later on, when they get back, we'll get you guys that information. So thank you again. I'm Shantae from the Urban League. Thank you, Cynthia, Crystal, Carol, and Gwendolyn. We really appreciate this conversation. So you guys have a good night.